another edition of the Teflon Tales. With me, for the first time, I actually have a guest that I've known for a long, long time, Sree Sankar. Welcome, Sri.
Thank you, Ashwin. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's get started with something that you and I were talking about before we hit the live button, right? Which is everyone aspires to get to a point in life where they're able to be confident in the fact that they can find the next thing, right? Versus saying, hey, do is the market there, am I marketable? And the idea that you have come to a point right now where it's less and less about job security. It's just about, okay, how does the job that you do align with the your own purpose, right? And that's a journey, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So the question is, how did you get to that point where you are today, where you have that deep rooted anchor, if you will, that gives you like, yeah, I mean, I can find the next thing. And obviously it doesn't happen overnight. So what can the viewers and listeners hear from your journey to accelerate their path to get to a point of saying, oh, I don't have to be this kind of wedded to or anxiety or anxious about finding the next job.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, great question, Ashwin. So I'm going to take you back to my past, right? So coming from an Indian background, my definition of success in the past used to be climbing the corporate ladder. So I even had like a graph for myself, like a hockey stick graph, talking about, hey, by this age I need to be a director. By this age I need to be a VP.
Yep.
But then, as I was climbing this corporate ladder, I realized I wasn't happy.
Mm.
Right? I felt that I was solving the same problems over and over again, and that didn't really excite me. And then I realized that I have to define what success looked like for myself, right? My own definition of success. Um, and how do I keep myself updated and excited in this market if I'm going to be working for another 20 years or 30 years, right? Is my current skill set enough? If I what do I need to do? And that's how that sparked my interest in like exploring different technologies. And there was a huge hype about AI and machine learning, and just the curiosity made me like get into that space and learn. And while I was at Facebook, I kind of made a deliberate effort to transition from a domain where networking, where I was like very well established, and then move into uh, machine learning and solving consumer problems.
Okay, so I'm going to hit pause with you mentioned two things. One is curiosity, right? About the need to learn what else is out there. And number two is market awareness or market fit, right? The thing of saying, okay, is your current skill set. So, and again, sometimes those are hard things to do, especially quote unquote, when you get good at one thing, right? Then the fear of, okay, I'm good at this. How? So it's almost like saying, let's say you become an expert at something, and as you're getting curious about something, you're actually a newbie, right? So in some say, going back to the Teflon analogy of you're getting hot or really hot at something else, and you're turning on the stove for something else which is brand new. So it's almost like a cognitive dissonance, right? To
Yes.
be able to straddle those two things where you're a nobody and then you're somebody over here. So again, how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, the struggle is very real, right? I think, and many people don't take that leap because of this fear of either even with myself. I was like thinking, oh, am I going to lose my seniority? Here I was on the peak of my career, doing keynote speeches for Facebook in networking domain, and then here wanting to switch to
Yeah.
a different space. Um, what I realized was the risk of being in the same domain was much higher than the risk of uh, finding or opportunities or enhancing my skills in a different domain. I think what helped me a lot is to have that support circle where I can really brainstorm and talk through these risks. I still remember, like, while there were many people who discouraged me, just finding that circle of friends who can still keep it real. I know I spoke to you. I spoke to a couple of my very close friends from Juniper, and also people at Facebook. I remember this statement that one of the architects that I work very closely with at Facebook, his statement was when I was discussing with him, "Hey, is it even worth taking this risk? I'm pretty nervous about it. What do I do now?" So he told me, "Hey, Sri, just go there. It's if you don't like it, even if you want to come back to networking, BGP is going to remain BGP, right?" For folks who are not very familiar with the networking domain, BGP is the protocol, internet protocol that I used to be working on, and so that gave me courage, or at least the risk analysis showed that my long-term ROI with the switch was better than me being stagnant in this current domain. It's just an additional thing that I'm adding to my resume than something that I'm going to lose.
Yeah,
Right.
and you mentioned a term that I frequently use as well, which is applying business principles to oneself. And you mentioned ROI, right, which
Right.
is typically used for business products and services. Now, but applying it to yourself, it is, hey, how much am I investing? What is the return? But also, what's the outcome desired? The outcome, like you mentioned, is to make Sri a more resilient person
Yeah.
by acquiring these various skills. So switching gears a little bit, I mean, yeah, one of the things you shared this with me a couple of months ago, and I was like amazed. Is there's another avatar you have taken on again, talking about Teflon again, right? And you've come up to speed really quickly becoming a product coach.
Mhm.
So talk a little about what is a product coach, and number two, you've had spectacular successes, but and talk about the successes obviously, but also how that success spurs you to do more things.
Got it. Cool. Yeah. So I do coach people to get into product management and also help land their dream job in one of these companies that I've worked in the past. Right. For me, it was more around uh, cracking the interview and even understanding what the product management function is like in some of these big companies was a challenge when I was trying for to move to Facebook or Amazon. So I've been mentoring people all the time. I enjoy it. It's just helping out, and even people reach out to me just for advice, or advice is always free, right? I mean, but then I think when COVID kicked in, I was thinking I'm saving 2 hours of my commute time. What do I do? It's typically a me time for myself, and can I? Is there an opportunity for me to help, especially in a situation where people are struggling to find roles, and that's how I got into this whole coaching stuff, more like hey, can I spend a few hours in a week helping out other people crack product management interviews, and also understanding what this function is like. Now you ask me like what keeps me going, and I think the gratification, right? When someone tells you, more than them landing a job or anything, it's the gratification you get out of hearing from them that I've made them a better product manager, or like that's very rewarding, and that keeps me going. And also I think one of the uh, at least my vision is they can now coach somebody else, right? So
So
pass
I
on.
want to unpack this a little bit, because you kind of put a lot of things in that, and again, I'm trying to kind of connect this with people who are in the same boat or want to kind of become more Teflon like you, which is understanding that COVID has changed the environment, and again, putting it personally to yourself is like, hey, you have an extra 2 hours every single day. So that's, I think the first thing is that the self-reflection of saying, okay, what has changed personally for me, right? That extra 2 hours, how am I going to put that to use? And the easiest thing to do is, oh, I'm going to quote unquote work extra hours, right? Okay, so or work, even though people don't say it, they work less efficiently, because now
Yeah.
you're drawing the same stuff over multiple hours. But to your point, to actually go back and say, okay, what is it that I can give back? What skill set do I have? And I have extra time in my hands, and there is a need. right? I think connecting those dots is something that I think is very remarkable, right? To be able to assess the situation outside, assess your own ability to help, and not overstretch yourself. But in this case, again, given that you had some really, really good experience both at Facebook and Amazon, and being able to showcase that in a way that actually helps the other person for a very good cause to help them kind of land a job, right? So I think for people again listening and viewing, it's important to kind of take that time to self-reflect, look at what's changed outside,
Yeah.
what's changed inside, and then how do you
The
connect that,
other
right?
thing I would say is it's not just a give, right? I learn a lot, especially during this time when you hardly meet people. Right? This gives me an opportunity to meet different set of people and learn from them as well. Everybody comes from a very different background, and it I think it makes me a better person. It's reciprocal altruism, I would say, but there is always a selfish motive with anything that you do. But that excites me.
No, I could not agree more. I think that I can completely empathize with what you're saying, because again, these Teflon tales have given me, and like I said, you and I
That is,
are the first time that I'm actually meeting somebody that I've known from the past. Every other guest has been a brand new connection, and a very, very strong connection. And it only happens because you are in it, not for yourself, right?
yeah.
And I think once you take yourself out of the picture, I think wonderful stuff happens. So I'm going to show one of our common buddies, Dilip. Thanks for the comment. Um, so moving on to something that again I struggle with, and I'm sure lots of others also, is right. You get hot, and you're really, really good at it, and the world puts you up on a pedestal, and you put yourself up. Your ego gets a big boost, but something tells you that you need to take a break, right? Something tells you you need to be non-sticky and not let that success get your head, and continue in that spiral. So I know you've done that, right? Getting to a point and then taking a break. Talk a little bit about what again gave you that courage, confidence, that you can come back, but more importantly, the indicators that it's time to cool down and walk away.
Got it. Cool. Yeah. So just to give you context, so when I was at Amazon, I took a break from working and took a sabbatical. And to answer your question, how did I arrive at that? Right. So uh, what I realized was, for me, balance was so important. Right. Family plus work and my personal life. So. This was, I think, last October, September time frame. I kind of launched this new product. It was like in Amazon. I was like completely feeling burnt out in the sense, okay, hey, from a work point of view, at the same time, there's so many things going on at my home front as well. My daughter, she's going to be a senior. She'll be going to college very soon. That feeling of, okay, hey, am I failing as a mother, and uh, am I know women try to have it all, and I've always strived for that. But at some time, I had to come to a point where, okay, hey, is this the right priorities for me, right? So I was debating this a lot. I really wanted to take a break so I can spend a little bit more time with my family, but at the same time, the conundrum, right? I've always identified with my job or my career. So it was a very tough decision or to make. But then I think I remember talking to uh, Radhika and you during this period that I was going through all this in my head, and just hearing somebody else do the same gave me a lot more confidence in one way, right? The second thing is, at that time, while everybody discouraged me, I was looking at what are the pros and cons, right? What is it that I have to prioritize in my life, and what does success look like for me, right? For Sree as a product, and Shree's two products, who are my kids, first of all, and thinking through how do I prioritize them with my career. And I think being in both Facebook and having switched different roles and being able to being in Amazon as well, like gave me that confidence that uh, yes, even if I leave the workforce today, maybe when I come back, I might be able to either create work for myself or find another role. I think that uh, um, I at least felt very strongly about that, that I can make myself useful in some place.
Yeah, and again, just to reemphasize what you just said, and this is again something for the viewers and listeners, is that aspect of acquiring many skills along the way and trying different things. And it may not be evident during, like we talked about earlier, during the time that you're still a student and trying to learn the skill. But at some point, you look back and say, okay, I've done A, B, C, and D, right? And therefore, if A goes away and B goes away, I still have these two skills that I've learned along the way. I think that kind of, to your point, you only get that after having gone through the
The
trenches
journey.
of, yeah. So that again, yeah, and you mentioned this a few times, right? Which is a network that you can rely on, a non-judgmental network, yet one that's willing to now. And we've talked about this a few times, but it also goes both ways, right? So you give twice as much and you get. So how does somebody go about building this trusted network, especially, and I'm going to talk about this, but we are in the valley and it's a highly competitive environment. And like you talked about the hockey stick, people are measuring each other's hockey stick, who has a bigger curve and who's a VP and who's a CEO. And yet, if people put their mind to it, you can build a strong support network. And like you've done, broken through geographical barriers, and because of your product coach, you have people in multiple continents right now. So again, talk a little bit about that breaking through that so-called cocoon we live in, at least in
Yeah.
Silicon Valley, and being able to kind of broaden your mindset, and by doing that, you get into this highly resilient network.
Yeah, I think one point I want to highlight is building a network is much harder for a woman than a man. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, right? Because women tend to prioritize everything. If I have like half an hour in my day, I'm trying to think about, okay, what else can I finish? Then like taking that time to like reserve for, okay, hey, let me go meet people for coffee
Yeah.
and see how I can expand my network. So that's something that I consciously try to remind myself. At least I want to meet the 1%. Like I at least keep myself like pinging people. I find myself pinging people just for coffee or just brainstorming. Right? If I want to get a second opinion on certain things, I kind of reach out to a few. Right? First, finding that. The people who have very similar wavelength as you, but at the same time who you want to also find someone who can always counter you. What I see is I usually used to gravitate towards people who are like-minded. Then I realized, okay, I'm not learning anything new about, right? So then I made a conscious effort. Okay, hey, if he had a different point of view about this, okay, can I build a stronger relationship with him? So then I hear their perspective on it, right? So it's like building the Facebook social graph, I think. So in fact, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of good friends and also sponsors and mentors throughout my career, but it does take effort, right?
Mm.
You cannot just simply reach out to someone asking for a job. How do you keep uh, meeting them even without a need for yourself? There needs to be a,
Especially without a need, right? Yeah.
yeah, there needs to be times where you are able to give something back, or it has to be a casual conversation that you guys so that's how you build relationships and trust, I think.
So I'm going to put you on the spot over here, and I'm willing to answer that question also myself. But the question is, lots of times we come to forks in the road, right? And the way I think of it is the first 10, 20, 30 times you don't even, you ignore there's a fork, right? It's like, hey, there's a sign over here, I'm going to continue on that. Then you acknowledge there's a fork, and finally you take the path less trodden. So if there was one thing you would have done differently, right, to get to where you are faster, what would that one one thing be? And maybe we've covered it already, but I think it's a good kind of look back.
Uh, I know. I think I spent too much time in my first company, right? I think I was complacent. I was feeling very comfortable. It felt like home to me. I joined as an intern and grew into a leadership role there. But at the same time, the first transition was so hard. I remember still, right? I think I had the offer for like 3+ months, and I was like, oh my God, am I going to leave this and go? But then in retrospect, I'm thinking that I should have expanded myself or my knowledge more broadly earlier on. That's one thing. I mean, since you asked me, what would I have done differently? And the second thing, I guess, this whole realization of building that support network that came too late
Mhm.
to me, right? Always I used to put my head down and work. Uh, but coming to a realization that, okay, hey, it's a career is beyond a job. Uh, it, you, uh, I mean, there's more to learn and give back. That was a late realization as well for me. So I would just stick to those two.
Got it. So I have a question from friend Dilip over here. So I'll take a crack at it, Dilip, and then turn it over to Sri. Um, it is a from my perspective, it's a constant experimentation, rapid and constant experimentation. It goes back to Teflon, right? And it really, again, I'm going to err on the side of going tech over here. It's just like AI, which is unless you have enough data, you're going to be making bad predictions, or your algorithm is going to be biased because you have such little data. So again, from my perspective, what you truly care for really comes down to how many things have you experimenting, and at what point. Like I'll tell you honestly, right? This thing, middle of the week for me, talking to amazing people gives me the midweek boost that I could not have even. Nothing like this has ever happened to me, right? So launching the Teflon Tales and doing this every Wednesday gives me something that is very subliminal, and I wouldn't have even done this unless I had the opportunity to actually put in my request for LinkedIn Live. It took a year for them to actually grant it to me, and then actually, after I got it, I just stayed quiet for 3 4 weeks because I didn't know what I was going to do with it, right? Because there's so many great LinkedIn Live hosts. I said, what do I have to add? And then I posted this video on Teflon, and then that took off, and that gave me the idea. So, long story short, I think Dilip, I think there is no quick path to it. There is a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of failures, colossal failures that you have to learn from, but that gives you the courage to kind of keep going. So, Sri, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. Life is an experimentation, and right. One thing that I would like to add is uh, at least I like to jot down what are my values and what are my tenets, right? What can I not, what is it that I don't want to do, at least, right? Something that guides me as I'm making these experiments in my life. So at least identifying those is key to me, right? For example, okay, hey, if I don't align with a certain value, then I just want to make sure that uh, that's part of my tenet, and I'm working around it, right? So just to add to what you said.
No, I think that's also. I mean, I think you're spot on, right? I think knowing what the pillars are, what you're willing to compromise, what you will never compromise, right? That gives you that anchor of saying how as you experiment, you don't stray too far away from your core principles. I think
Yes.
that's. Um, so again, going back full circle, right? We've talked about balance and flexibility. We talked about non stickiness. Last question, which is, I know a lot of people, right, who have told me, "Oh, I'm going to start a podcast. Oh, I'm going to start writing," right? And there are people I know really, really well, right? And I keep prodding them. Did I miss your article? Have you started a podcast? And then life takes over. So talk a little bit about how do you go from 0 to 60, not giving yourself any excuse for not putting the discipline in place very, very quickly, because life is short.
Yeah.
And you could, yeah, I mean, I won't elaborate on that, but just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I'm going to give you very tactical tips on what worked for me, right? Let's talk about even my transition into from networking to the machine learning domain. And I know even I have procrastinated for a long time. Okay, hey, I know I wanted to do this, but you always make excuses
Yeah,
of, oh, I don't have time, or like, okay, hey, my work is too busy. What is my manager going to think if I'm going to focus on something else outside of my work?
yeah.
Right? So all those things used to bother me. But what I realized was identifying what uh, motivates me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I realized that uh, uh, having that external validation helps me keep motivated, right? So when I used to self learn in Facebook, so I created this circle where we said, okay, hey, if you're interested in understanding outside of what your work expertise is, every in the quarter, the last month of every quarter, we block Wednesday afternoon, so
Hmm.
everybody comes and presents. So I put it on the calendar that, okay, hey, this is my goal to present to the team about, okay, computer vision,
Yeah,
right? So that forced me to, okay, now, hey, there is an external audience now. So finding schemes, right? Again, this is
right.
very tactical approach. uh, this so finding that what is that intrinsic motivation and that drives you is key, I believe, because I've done this many times, even with workouts. You do it for one day, but then you're not motivated to continue. But having that social circle to support you through, uh, and keep you honest with your progress, uh, and checking on you whether so having somebody else do that for you might help, right? So creating that circle um, helps. Anything else that I can add? I think that's what has worked for
Yeah,
me.
so I would agree. I mean, for me also the same thing. It's like the ability to uh, have that circle of confidence, right? It's almost you can go and open yourself up completely to them, and but at the same time realize that circle of confidence is also something that you want to contribute to,
Yes.
right? And so that I think is a huge. And for me, it took a long time to realize, like you mentioned earlier, you just can't go knocking on doors for help if you haven't helped 2x the number of time at least to that group, right? That's, I call that the karma bank. And the other thing, again, I completely agree with you, is really the consistency, which putting something down and holding yourself accountable to stick to that. I think that makes for a lot of quick progress. So again, Sree, great conversation. Again, thanks for your time, and looking forward to seeing future success.
Thanks for having me, Ashwin. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you.